The Jerusalem guards destroyed anything that wasn't Yahweh's law, and the memories of the divine feminine consciousness of Asherah was destroyed.
And we need to integrate that balance, because the only way we could rise in wisdom and rise in our consciousness and rise as a civilization is to integrate both.
So who is the divine feminine? When you look back into ancient Mesopotamia, where Palestine is today, 7 miles north of that, you can see during the 1940s, there have been excavations that have happened. And throughout these excavations, they have been finding figurines, jewelry, artifacts, giving us insight to what the ancient Hebrews were actually communicating with. Well, these ancient artifacts were actually artifacts of Asherah. And I believe Asherah to be an emanation of the Divine Mother, because as you know, as above, so below, as we become more dense, so as we move from planetary to earthly beings, we move from, let's just say, a 7th or 6th density being, 5th density being, and we move into the 3rd density. But I believe Asherah to be a higher frequency being. And what she did was she came during those times and she had taught agriculture and how to settle, a lot of things that the people of those times didn't know how to do. They were hunter-gatherers. This was around 5,000 years ago. So you could see that these people or these ancient cultures were actually in balance with their feminine because they revered the goddess to a high degree. Why? Because she helped humanity during that time. And also, she was removed from the Hebrew scriptures and also the biblical canon that we call Christianity today. Her name is Asherah. She's also known as the Lion Lady, Hathor, or Sekhmet, Aphrodite. She's depicted as a female with larger breasts and big mane-like hair. You can tell that she was definitely female through these artifacts.
So she taught a lot of people in indigenous cultures. In North America specifically, she was known as the Corn Mother. My opinion is that she comes from the divine wisdom. She's an emanation and a physical manifestation. After the flood, she was able to come and teach civilizations how to do things like agriculture and still survive. So this divine wisdom, it does come down and it's manifest in these prolific women throughout the ages, and Asherah is one of them.
Yes, Asherah being one of the Elohim, which actually is plural and means the powerful ones. And so I just want to bring up that when we look 24,000 years ago, we can see that the pyramids of Giza were actually pointed to the constellation of Leo. And the North Star was not Polaris, but Vega. And when you look into Vega, there's history of lioness beings. Now, why would they call Asherah the Lion Lady? Or Hathor is another emanation of this being, the Lion Lady. My belief is that the divine feminine comes through this type of archetype. And the reason why I believe that is because there's a lot of traditions connecting to lioness beings. And I can give you an example. Jesus, Ben Panther. Yeshua, Ben Panther was actually Jesus Christ's real name.
Jesus was referred to as the Lion of the tribe of Judah in the book of Revelation. There's many lion references that you'll see in the Bible and outside of the biblical canon.
There's also Zoroastrian's Mithra. Mithra is depicted as riding on a lion. And that's not the only thing. There is Durga. Durga is in the Hindu culture, and she is representative of the divine feminine. And she's also riding on a lion. When you look at old statues of Asherah, she's holding 2 lions by their ears. I believe that we have a connection to the celestial stars that humanity hasn't made just yet. We are connected to the divine, we are connected to source, and we're connected to other planets, which are actually populated with other species of humanist-like beings. It's interesting because the Bible, it does give you some pointers of Sirius and Orion and Pleiades. It talks about certain aspects of these beings that did exist. We also know that the Essenes, they were calling in a high celestial being to balance this planet because maybe the patriarchy was too overbearing. And there was a lot of the monarchies and the priesthoods that were coming after Cathars, troubadours, Gnostics, because their belief in the divine feminine, and they believed it to be coming from a different place, a different planet.
The places of worship, or even the statues that were created to embrace and show love to the divine feminine, they were all ordered by Josiah to be destroyed. And you could see that from the 10 commandments that were given to Moses. They wanted no god to be worshipped other than Yahweh of the Old Testament. And this God called for destruction of any other god or temple that was dedicated to anyone but him. And it was made evident by King Josiah. Josiah was an 8-year-old king, and he had no control over what was happening, but he was guided by the priesthoods and the elders that were already in control, in power, and they made it easier for them to go in and destroy anything that was not of their God.
Yeah, like I want to touch upon King Josiah's grandfather, who was King Hezekiah. And King Hezekiah was actually the first king to want to clean up this old religion, the old religion that is the emanation of the divine feminine. The Jerusalem guards destroyed anything that wasn't Yahweh's law. And the memories of the divine feminine consciousness of Asherah was destroyed. King Josiah, which was his grandson, he wanted to even more so install these beliefs of only one God, monotheism. Why? Because it's easier to control people if they believe there's only one. And there is only one creator. I do agree with that. But it's not Yahweh is what I'm trying to say. When this cleanup in Judaism happened, the Jewish mystics of the time actually revered the divine feminine. They revered Asherah. King Josiah reformed Judaism after he found the laws of Yahweh. He found it in the renovations of a Jerusalem temple. In 2 Kings, there's a verse of what these laws looked like. Book of Kings chapter 23:4 says, "The king, Josiah, ordered Hilkiah, the high priest, the priest next in rank, and the gatekeepers to remove from the temple of Yahweh all the items made of Asherah, along with all of the sky armies." King Josiah regarded that as idolatry and had no interest in allowing people to understand that there was celestial contact happening to the Jewish mystics of the time, the Hebrews of the time, and even the civilizations at the time. It wasn't just about changing the religion, it was about changing what people believed. Their history about advanced beings and the understanding and the knowledge about the cosmos and the annihilation of the divine feminine energy that nurtured humanity. This emanation of Sophia that came into the form of Asherah and all other goddesses, Hathor, Sekhmet, Isis. These are all divine emanations of a higher frequencied being that is connected to the mother goddess, Sophia, wisdom. Josiah, like Matt was saying, was only 8 years old, which meant that the revision didn't just come from him. It came from the high priest families that were controlling him. But also at the same time, there was another king. Edward VI was crowned king at only 9 years old and inherited the throne of England from his father, King Henry VIII. It wasn't good because now the monarchy and the priesthoods can push forward with their advancements of creating a monotheistic view and having it only be Yahweh's law. Now, Yahweh is a powerful one and is depicted as a dragon or serpent-like being. And when you actually think about that, what does that remind you of? And I'm not saying that dragons or serpents are necessarily evil, because I do believe that the Kundalini rising is the serpent energy that rises up the spine, the 33-degree vertebrae, to reach the crown in order to create enlightenment. But I just want to say that he is depicted as a being that is not human, meaning that this being came from the celestial realms, or aka space, another planet. I would just like to point out that all of these revisions were done in the 6th century BCE. So that's when the Hebrew canon was created to be monotheistic. During that time where they imported Yahweh's law.
They saw it as an opportunity to centralize the power. So every one of those priests were saying, we can install this king and have him do our bidding. Now we have an opportunity to seize the power and eliminate any of their competition, any priests, any other shrines. This was the time, and they did it, and they capitalized not only with Josiah, but like Sam said, the young king of England.
Now, this was just the Jewish revision of the texts. Keep this in mind. And the Christian scriptures during the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD, that's when they revised the Bible that we have today. So there was another revision that had happened of the New Testament, leaving out 18 years of Christ's miracles, right? And what he did during that time when he traveled to India, Japan, Britain, he traveled to Tibet, he traveled across the world. So for all the people out there who are just reading the Old Testament and wondering why Yahweh requires blood sacrifice of cows, lambs, sheep, virgin girls, and gold, you now know that it was never the God that Jesus was talking about. It was actually a powerful one, an Elohim, who wanted to control and decimate the divine feminine. Because when we integrate the divine feminine, the knowledge of this wisdom of Sophia, we become powerful beings in ourselves that can open up the 7 seals, aka the 7 chakras, and purify them, and also join our celestial counterparts in the sky. Because what is going on right now is a control aspect of humanity. And if we are dwelling in our lower realms without integrating the feminine, because these goddesses were teaching us how to nurture, how to love. They were divine beings with powerful, loving energy. And that's what we need to integrate. And I'm not revering them as gods, okay? I call them goddesses. I quote that. They were higher vibrational beings. And they were an emanation of Sophia, and they just wanted humanity to also obtain this enlightenment. And it's interesting because there is something trying to control us. And we know this because on a fundamental level, when you see 2 children playing with one another, they love each other. But when they grow up, they have all these downloaded programs of hatred and warlike mentality. And it's not coming from the fundamental understanding of humanity. Like, it's not coming from their heart, obviously. It's coming from programs outside of themselves and the programs of the patriarchy. And I'm not hating on men, obviously, because we do need men to support and to protect the women, the divine feminine. And that's their role that they're playing. But we're too far masculine in what we are doing today. And the whole purpose of what we are trying to convey right now is that there was an integration of the divine feminine inside the consciousness of those people who existed then. And also there was a deliberate erasing of this knowledge.
Even in Plato's time, in the Republic, he talks about having equal treatment for men and women. And this is 400 BC, 300 BC, give or take. This is a time where you would think that they weren't in balance, but they had a lot of teachings that they integrated not only in themselves. Now, I'm not saying that men and women are built the same. That's not what he was saying either. But we do need to have that balance. So for the Jewish priesthood of Jesus's time to come in and sweep out any other religion and implement their own was a power play. And now it rippled into our day and age because now we're seeing the effects of having too much of one side of things being in control. And we need to integrate that balance because the only way we could rise in wisdom and rise in our consciousness and rise as a civilization is to integrate both. So again, we're just going to keep focusing on that concept.
Let's go back in history and talk about Gilgamesh for a second, because Gilgamesh was a hybrid king. And he was 5 meters tall, depicted holding a lion under his arm.
Another lion reference.
Another lion reference, yes, exactly. And he was a crossover between the powerful ones and the humans. He ruled Uruk, which is today modern day Iraq, meaning that there were ET-like beings referred to as gods during that time, translating to the powerful ones. So from these tablets that are in our distinct past, we knew that we were once ruled over by an extraterrestrial race, or the powerful ones, if you want to call them, the Elohim.
Well, it's even listed in the Sumerian kings list. You're going to see these beings that were actually reigning for thousands of years. And then you see hundreds of years. And then you start to see more human lifetimes, more human lifespans. And that's as we further and further got away from these divine celestial beings. And then they passed over rulership to the humans.
There's clearly a memory of advanced technologies and advanced civilizations, or ETs, that have been ruling over humanity in the past. I just want to point out that some of them came here to nurture and to coddle and to love us, but some of them came here to dominate and exploit and control us. So these are actually recorded in Greek, Nigerian, Norse, Celtic, Zulu, Edu, Indian, and Mayan cultures that all speak of these advanced beings that came from the stars. Orion is mentioned by the ancient Egyptians. Sirius is mentioned by the Dogon tribes of Mali, Africa. The Pleiades are mentioned by the Aboriginal people of Australia and their native people. So now that we've established that there is a divine feminine goddess who was helping humanity develop, and that she wasn't exactly from this planet, I just want to say that this feminine consciousness has been erased from the scriptures and from our memories because of control and exploitation of the human consciousness.
So you're going to see that happen throughout the ages, especially when it comes to pushing an agenda. You're going to see the winners always writing the history books, and the losers are going to be the ones who are heretics or the conspirators.
And I just want to point out that the Jewish people in the 7th century BCE, they rejected Yahweh and his law. They remembered Asherah and commemorated her and loved her for what she had done for them, and gave thanks to her involvement in advancing civilization and advancing the human story.
Now, some of these Elohim weren't bad. Some of them were good. It's like a council. It's like any sort of organization that you have. There's going to be people advocating for human life and those who are just advancing their specific agendas and goals. And these Elohim were comprised of beings that had multiple perspectives. Some were known as geneticists. Some were known as warriors. Some were known as architects. My point is, these beings were diverse and representing the archetypes that can manifest in reality.
As above and so below, and we are made up of the same components of the stars and the planets. They are us and we are them. They are an emanation of the aeons that exist that are represented in the Gnostic teachings, the higher wisdoms. And we are lower emanations of these beings when we connect to the higher realms, or we could be connecting to the lower aeons, which we talked about in our first podcast: deceit, lust, greed, etc., etc. So I ask you, who are you connecting with?